In this exercise, we're going to work with assembly mates. So the first important rule of assemblies is to keep all of your parts in the same directory. Right now, if you go and make this assembly without copying the assembly directory over to your flash drive and you try and open the assembly later, it won't work. So the first thing you're going to do is go up to File, Open, and we're going to browse to CAD data on Midtown 2, and you'll see the assembly mates directory. You want to right click on that directory. The hourglass will be there for a little bit while you're doing this. So right click on that directory, go down to copy, and your machine will copy it. Then you want to go to your flash drive. I'm going to put this in my directory, but you'll want to go to your flash drive. Open up the folder you want to put it in, and then click paste. And now that'll show up in that folder that you have access to all the time. Okay? Once you've done that, you can go ahead and click cancel, and then we're going to go new, assembly, and then click OK. Once you're in the assembly, over on the left, you want to browse and go to the directory where your parts are. So select that directory, and you're going to open up the knee solid part. With the knee part open, you want to turn on your origin so you know where to place it. So you can go up here under Show High Items, click View Origins, click out of there, and then be careful not to click because you might place it somewhere else, but you want to put your mouse cursor on top, and you'll see that little icon that indicates the two origins are on top of each other. So then you'll click there. So you've inserted your first part into the assembly. That first step, all that does is it aligns the front plane of the first component with the front plane of the assembly, the top plane of the assembly with the top plane of the first component, the right plane with the right plane of the first component. You don't have to do that origin aligning step, but it makes it nicer if you're basing everything off of the first component you put in the assembly. So now I'm going to bring the others in. So let's go get the saddle, place that in here, and while we're putting some in, we'll get the table. Place that in there. All right, so now I'm going to do some mates. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to select mate, and then I'm going to grab this top surface. I'm going to click my third mouse button, rotate around, and grab the bottom surface of the saddle, and check OK. Then I need to grab one of the dovetail faces in order to constrain it in the other direction. So I'm going to grab that face of the dovetail, then I'll come over here, grab this face. Now those two are mated. Your tutorial will tell you to do a third step. I'm going to omit that here, but right now if you look, this slides back and forth on the dovetail, just like it would in real life. The next one I'm going to do is I'm going to mate this surface to the bottom surface of the table, and I'm going to repeat that dovetail step on the new table. So click there, rotate around, click there. If you click the wrong dovetail, your mate's not going to work out right. So now, if you imagine this mill has handles on it, I can drag those parts back and forth. Now, if a part's in the way, like this table, I can click on it and I can go to Hide Components and it'll fade out. It's still there, it's still over in your feature tree, but it's hidden from our view. So the next thing I'm going to bring in is a little holder for our encoder. So I'm going to go, and I believe it's called bracket. Yeah, it's this part right here. You can also double click instead of hitting open. And I'm going to line this up with the front face of the saddle. So I'll click that front face. I'll click this face on the bracket. Those two line up. Check OK. I'm going to click this top surface and this surface. Those two, I want to offset them. So right now, the distance between them is 58 millimeters. I want to make that 3. And I also want to hit flip dimension, which will sink it below that surface. So now if I look, these two are moving together. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select the right plane of bracket and the right plane of table. I'll exit out of this mate first. All right. So since table's hidden, I'm going to turn, oh wait, sorry. I wanted to do the right plane of saddle. That's why it wasn't letting me do that. If I click mate, go in here, I'll expand this again, go to the right plane of bracket, and then go up here to saddle, expand saddle, and get the right plane of saddle. It'll mate those two as well, so I can check OK. So now that part's been added. The next one I'm going to add is a blue piece that's our encoder. It's called the head. So I'm going to place that on here. First thing I'm going to do is rotate around and zoom in. You could also use select other for this portion. And then if you hit control, that will select both surfaces. You can open up the mate. And SOLIDWORKS assumes that we're going to make those concentric, which we are. So we check OK. Click this face. Click this face. Check OK. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click parallel, and then I'm going to select this face and this face. And I want them to be parallel. So now, if I exit out of check OK and exit out of mate, I can move the saddle back and forth, and I can move the encoder all around, and the only thing that can still slide is the dovetail joint. So that's pretty good. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my table back on. So if I go up here to show components, the table comes back on. And I'm going to bring in some more components. So I want to get the pillar, place that, insert more, browse. I want to get the clamp, and browse, and I want to get the pin. So now I have all three of those components in there. I'm going to zoom back in, and the first one I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pillar. So I'm going to select this cylindrical surface, which would be the threads, click mate, and I'll zoom in up here and select that surface. If you see it over here, it's pointing the wrong direction. I want to change mate alignment direction, so now it would be threading in here correctly. So that one's taken care of. The next one I'm going to do is this surface, and I'll zoom in and get the shoulder on the pillar and check OK. So now I have that part in place. Now, there's some stuff that SOLIDWORKS has you do with triads. I'm going to just rotate this component. Up here under Move Component, I can click Rotate Component and zoom in on this clamp. And I want to get it into the orientation that you need to use. So it's kind of around like that. This cylinder should be lined up with that cylinder there. So then, when I click Mate, and I zoom in, grab this cylinder, and grab this cylinder, check OK. If I look, that's lined up. I can bring it over to this end right where it was before. And then I need to, you can play around with moving these around to get them lined up. So I want this one to rotate around, I want it to rotate around like that. Then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here, click on this surface, and I have this point selected. That shouldn't be there. I'll delete that. And I'll come over here and grab the vertical surface in the clamp. And that's going to be a concentric, not a coincident. That was what was messing that up there. So that is currently aligned the opposite direction, so I'm going to flip it. So there, that's taken care of. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to line the center of this one, check OK on that, line the center of this one up with the center of that. And if you look, now that's moved up into the position that you wanted in your tutorial. So there, that's taken care of. The last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go back out under Assembly and go grab the scale, this part right here. Open that up, bring it in, and this clamp holds that scale in place. So I'm going to click on the outer surface of the scale and the inner surface of the clamp. And SOLIDWORKS assumes, since they're round, it wants it to be concentric. So I'm going to check OK with that. Then I'm going to put a mate in between that surface and this surface right here. Check OK. Zoom out. And now you can see if I move this around, the encoder moves in and out like it should, or the scale moves in and out of the encoder. This is the part that'll tell a milling machine. If you aren't used to using dials and you've only used digital readouts, this is the encoder for a digital readout. So that's what's going on there. You'll continue the last part. If you hit Control, you can copy these pieces, and you'll need each one to go over to the other side and assemble the same thing over there. The only thing over there that you don't want to do is line up the ends, because one of the last steps in your tutorial is to come in here and change this mate. So if you go and look, if you open up this part right here and go to mates, and you see that coincident mate right there, you can right click on it, go to Edit Feature, and you can change it from coincident to distance and set it to 5. And that'll make your scale look more centered in the other clamp as well. So the other thing with these is save often, so make sure you're saving your part, and you can complete the rest of the part by following the tutorial.